My name is Evelyn Moore. I'm 70 years old, and 7 days ago, I buried the only man I ever loved. The night it happened, we were sitting at the same mahogany table where Alan and I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, and Sunday breakfasts for nearly 4 decades. But this time, the room was cold. Not from the temperature, but from the absence of him and the presence of something else I couldn't quite name yet. My son, Trent, sat across from me, his eyes glued to his plate. He hadn't said much since Alan's funeral. I'd told myself he was grieving in his own way. I'd convinced myself that silence was just his version of sadness. But the woman sitting beside him, his wife, Marla, wore an expression that had nothing to do with grief. She sliced into her roast chicken with the same determination she always had when asserting herself. "Now that your husband is dead," she said, setting her fork down with clinical precision, "you should take some time to grieve, pack your bags, and never come back." I blinked. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The words felt too cruel, too calculated to come from anyone I'd ever invited into my home. I looked at Trent, waiting, pleading, maybe for him to push back, to say, "That's not what we meant." He didn't. He nodded. And in that moment, the air went still. Something in me cracked, not like glass, not loud, but soft and final, like an old photograph curling at the edges. I'd always thought grief came in waves. But that night, it came in silence and signatures. The home Alan and I had spent 35 years building brick by brick, memory by memory, was no longer mine, according to them. I was, in their eyes, a guest whose welcome had expired the moment Alan drew his last breath. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I passed the breadbasket across the table with steady hands, and I excused myself politely. But as I walked up the stairs, something inside me shifted. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was finished. They were wrong. And I had exactly 1 week left in this house to remind them whose story they were trying to erase. The next morning, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee cooling in front of me. It was the same table where Alan used to read the paper, his reading glasses slipping down his nose while he grumbled about the state of the world. Without him there, the silence had a different weight. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in narrow bands, cutting across the linoleum floor. I could still smell the faint traces of his aftershave in the hallway, clinging to the edges of the air like a memory refusing to let go. I wrapped both hands around the mug, trying to warm myself, though it wasn't the cold I needed protection from. Marla's voice still echoed in my mind, sharp and clinical. The way she'd said grieve, like it was a phase I needed to wrap up quickly, like I was an inconvenience. And Trent, my Trent, hadn't even flinched. He just sat there, letting her speak for both of them. The chair across from me was empty. It wasn't just a missing person, it was a missing anchor. I imagined Alan sitting there now, watching me carefully, reading my face the way he always could. He would have seen it last night, the second my heart broke in a new place. He would have reached across the table, covered my hand with his, and said something soft like, "Let it roll off, Evie. We'll handle it." But there was no "we" anymore. And that was the cruelest part. I stood, finally, and poured the cold coffee down the sink. The window above the faucet overlooked the backyard, where the wind stirred the branches of the old maple Alan planted the year Trent was born. If they were going to push me out, they would learn something first. I don't break. I reassemble. 2 days passed before either of them brought it up again. I was in the laundry room, folding towels the way Alan always liked edges tucked, stacked by size when I heard footsteps approach. Marla never entered a room quietly. She carried herself like someone always performing for an invisible audience. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "I've been looking at some brochures," she began, her voice sugar, coated but brittle underneath. "There's a really nice senior community just outside Ashford. Walking trails, a hair salon, even art classes. I think it would suit you." I kept folding. "I'm not sure I'm looking to move right now," I said evenly. She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Trent and I just worry about you rattling around here alone. It's a big house for one person. And we've actually been talking about growing the family. More space would really help. There it was. The shift from concern to claim. I placed a hand flat against the warm towel pile, grounding myself. I turned to look at her. "I'm managing fine," she shrugged. "Of course. It's just, time moves on. And Alan, he wouldn't want you to be isolated. You deserve to be around people your own age." I stared at her. At the glossed lips, the carefully chosen sympathy. There was no warmth behind it. No kindness. Just the cold gleam of strategy. "You're really trying to make this sound like a favor," I said. "I'm trying to help," she replied too quickly. That was when Trent appeared behind her, silent at first, hands in his hoodie pocket like a teenager caught somewhere he shouldn't be. "Mom," he said, "we just want what's best for you." I nodded slowly. "And what's best for me is apparently not in this house." Neither of them answered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow, useless circles above me. Alan's side of the bed was untouched, the pillow still slightly indented from where he last rested his head. I hadn't moved it. I wasn't ready to. The house creaked in the way old houses do, settling, groaning, remembering. I closed my eyes and tried to summon his voice, just to hear it once more. But all I heard was the echo of my own thoughts, louder in the quiet than I wanted them to be. What kind of son watches his mother be pushed out of her home and says nothing? What kind of woman smiles while doing it? And what kind of fool was I for not seeing it sooner? I got up around midnight, slipped into Alan's flannel robe, walked barefoot down the stairs, past the framed photos on the wall, Trent's graduation, our 25th anniversary, Alan with his arm slung around me on the porch swing. I paused at that last one. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I turned toward his study. I hadn't gone in there since the funeral. The door creaked as I opened it. His desk lamp still worked, bathing the room in a pool of warm light. His glasses were right where he left them. So was the leather notebook he used to jot down ideas, phone numbers, passwords he refused to store digitally. I sat down in his chair. It still smelled like him cedar and coffee. I opened the notebook and flipped through the pages slowly. Names, dates, scribbles. And then, halfway through, I found something that made my fingers stop. A name I didn't recognize. And a dollar amount underlined 3 times. The next morning, I dressed with more intention than I had in weeks. I put on the navy blouse Alan liked, the one with the pearl buttons, and sprayed the faintest touch of his cologne on my wrist. I didn't know what I was preparing for exactly, but it felt like something had shifted, like I wasn't just a widow anymore. First Citizens Bank was only 10 minutes away. Alan and I had banked there for over 30 years. He always insisted on handling the accounts himself. Less to worry about, he used to say. Now, I wished I had worried a little more. The woman behind the glass desk wore a name tag that read, Margaret. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone I appreciated instantly. When I explained who I was and that I needed to understand my financial situation, her expression softened. "Of course, Mrs. Moore. I'm so sorry for your loss. Let's take a look together." She pulled up our profiles and began scrolling, her brow arched slightly. "There are quite a few accounts here. Some in joint names, some only in yours." "In mine?" "Yes, ma'am. You're listed as sole account holder on 2 CDs, a money market fund, and a trust." "A trust?" Margaret nodded. "Moore Family Trust. Established 5 years ago. It receives regular transfers from an operating account labeled MFT Construction." I blinked. Alan had always told me the company was sold, that nothing came from it after he retired. "Would you like printouts of everything?" "Yes," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, clear. As she clicked through tabs, the numbers made my breath catch. Quietly, in the background of our life, Alan had built me a safety net. Brick by brick, number by number. They thought I had nothing. They were wrong. Donald Barron's looked exactly how I remembered him, stoic, pressed shirt, glasses that slipped down the bridge of his nose as he read. He'd been Alan's accountant for over 15 years. We'd only met a handful of times at holiday parties or barbecues, but today, he stood when I walked into his office like I was someone important. "Mrs. Moore," he said, offering a warm handshake. "Alan spoke of you often. I'm so sorry." "Thank you, Donald. I need to understand something, and I think you're the only person who can help." I opened my purse and took out the bank statements Margaret had printed, laying them gently on his desk. He adjusted his glasses and read through them silently. "Ah, I see it's time." "Time for what?" Donald leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "Alan didn't sell the business, Evelyn. 5 years ago, he restructured. The assets were placed into the Moore Family Trust. The company still operates quietly, profitably, and you, ma'am, are the sole beneficiary of that trust." I stared at him. "I don't understand. He told me there was nothing left." "He said that to protect you," Donald said gently. "He saw how things were changing, how Trent and Marla treated you. He made sure that no matter what happened, you'd have control, independence, power." The words hit me harder than Marla's insults ever had. Donald slid a folder across the desk. "These are the financials from the last 3 years. As you'll see, the company's been thriving. Alan worked mostly behind the scenes. Tom Bradley, your site foreman, has been handling operations." I opened the folder. Line after line of black ink on white paper. Profit, growth, dividends. Alan hadn't just left me money. He'd left me leverage. And I finally knew what to do with it. Back at home, I sat at Alan's old desk with the folder Donald had given me spread open like a roadmap. The numbers no longer frightened me, they told a story. Every quarterly profit, every reinvested dividend, every careful transfer. Alan had choreographed it all with the quiet precision of a man who saw the storm coming years before it arrived. Near the back of the file was a thinner envelope marked simply, "Loans." Inside, I found contracts, neatly typed, signed by both Alan and Trent. Each one recorded a different date, a different amount: $8,500 for a failed food truck venture, $12,000 for a real estate flip that never flipped, $27,000 for what was vaguely labeled capital investment. There were 8 loans in total, all structured with interest rates and repayment timelines. None had been repaid. According to the attached spreadsheet, Trent owed the business just over $91,000 before interest. I sat back in the leather chair, dizzy not from shock, but from clarity. Alan hadn't just given Trent money. He had documented everything. Protected the business, protected me. And Trent, he had taken every dollar, believing he'd never have to answer for it. I flipped to the last page and found Alan's handwriting steady, all caps. "Every gift leaves a receipt." That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even boil water for tea. I sat in silence, surrounded by paper and proof, and I made a list. Tomorrow, I'd call Tom Bradley. I wanted to hear from the man running my business. And then, I'd decide exactly how to deal with my son. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy. And I had no intention of leaving it to someone who thought I was disposable. The next time Trent stopped by, he didn't bother knocking. The front door swung open like it belonged to him, and he called out from the foyer, "Mom, we've got a showing scheduled for Thursday. Realtor says we'll get good offers if we list fast." I was sitting in Alan's chair when he walked into the study. The folder from Donald was closed on the desk in front of me. A cup of coffee, fresh and untouched, sat beside it. Trent looked surprised to see me there, like I was intruding in my own home. "We'll need to get everything decluttered," he continued, eyes scanning the room. "Neutral tones, clear surfaces. Buyers like to imagine themselves in the space." I folded my hands. "Trent, sit down." He hesitated, then dropped into the chair across from me like he was humoring an elderly client. "I spoke to the bank, and to Donald Barron's." His jaw twitched. "I know about the trust, about the company, about the loans." For the first time in a long time, Trent didn't have a script. His mouth opened, then closed again. His fingers drummed a rhythm on the arm of the chair. "Mom, I raised a hand. Don't. Not yet. I opened the folder and slid the top document toward him. The signature line was unmistakable, his, in dark ink. You've borrowed over $91,000 from the company. My company. That money was for both of us, Dad said. Dad documented every cent, I said. And every missed payment. He slumped back, the color draining from his face. You don't get to take the house, I said softly. You don't get to inherit a legacy you've treated like a loan you never planned to repay. And for once, he didn't have anything to say. Marla arrived 15 minutes later, heels clicking across the hardwood like gunfire. She came armed with a clipboard, color swatches, and the kind of smile women wear when they think they've already won. I found a stager, she said breezily, tossing her coat onto the arm of the sofa. And a photographer. We'll want to move fast if we want to catch the spring buyers. Trent stood awkwardly near the fireplace, hands shoved into his pockets, still pale from our earlier conversation. I didn't offer coffee. Or warmth. Instead, I placed the stack of documents on the coffee table, one by one, like cards in a quiet game. What's this? Marla asked. Proof, I said. I gestured toward the top page. The Moore Family Trust. Established 5 years ago. Alan placed the company into it, and I am the sole beneficiary. That business never belonged to you, Trent, not for 1 minute. Marla frowned and reached for the papers, scanning the legal language. But the house, surely this house. I slid the next document across. 18 months ago, Alan took out a home equity loan. That loan funded part of the business trust. The deed lists him as sole owner. Upon his passing, the property became legally entangled with the trust's structure. Trent looked like he might sit down, but didn't. Which means, I continued, this house is not part of your inheritance, nor is it yours to sell, stage, or photograph. Marla's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I let the silence stretch. You tried to treat me like a loose end, I said softly. But Alan, he made sure I was the final chapter. Marla's clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a flat, hollow sound. No one moved to pick it up. They came back with a lawyer. A week later, I received a letter on thick ivory paper, filled with passive-aggressive phrases like undue influence and contesting the fiduciary designation. I read it once, then again, then slid it across my kitchen table to James Calder, my attorney of 20 years. He chuckled dryly. This isn't a case. It's a tantrum in legalese. We spent the next hour reviewing every trust clause Alan had put in place. James had advised on most of them. Alan had been deliberate, measured, meticulous. There were no cracks to slip through. No angle unprotected. 3 days after that, Trent and Marla showed up in person. No smiles this time. No brochures. Just forced civility and the heat of desperation masked as courtesy. We don't want to escalate this, Trent said, perched stiffly on the edge of the couch. You already did, I replied, calmly pouring tea I had no intention of sharing. Marla jumped in. There's no need for lawsuits. Family shouldn't fight like this. Family, I said slowly, shouldn't leave their mother at the dinner table with eviction notices dressed up as concern. Trent's voice cracked. You're tearing us apart over money. No, I said, setting down my cup. I'm protecting what your father built from people who never appreciated it. Marla leaned forward. Then let's settle. Something fair. You keep the business, we take the house. I stood. The house was collateral. It's part of the trust. You're not negotiating. You're begging. Trent rose too, fists clenched. We'll find another lawyer. This isn't over. I hope you do, I said. And I hope they read faster than you did. I walked them to the door without another word. This time, I didn't just close it. I locked it. 6 months later, I stood on the back porch of a cottage that faced the Pacific, coffee warming my palms, ocean breeze tugging at my sleeves. The house sat on a bluff near Mendocino, where the wind spoke in hushes and the salt air softened everything it touched. It had been Alan's final secret. Margaret, the trust administrator, found the deed buried under years of tax filings. The purchase had been made in the trust's name. Tucked into the folder was a sticky note, written in his familiar, blocky script. When she's ready for peace. I hadn't known I was ready until I saw it. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, wide windows, floors that creaked like honest conversation. But it was mine. Every paint color, every light fixture, every book on the shelf was chosen because I liked it, not because it matched someone else's preferences. Tom Bradley still called every Friday with company updates. The business was thriving under his care. Profits came in like clockwork. I reviewed quarterly reports over tea, made notes in the margins, and approved everything with a steady hand. Trent and Marla had defaulted on their first settlement payment. James filed the garnishment paperwork last week. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel sorry either. I planted herbs on the windowsill, learned how to make French press coffee, found a second-hand book club at the local library. No one there knew my last name or my history. They just knew I loved novels about women who survive things. That morning, as the sun cracked the edge of the horizon and painted the sea gold, I whispered to the wind, "I'm still here." It didn't answer. It didn't have to. Some silences are finally welcome. People often talk about grief as a thing that fades, a wound that closes. But the truth is, some absences never quiet. You just grow around them like trees curling around fences, or rivers carving new paths when the old ones run dry. I will never stop missing Alan. Not his voice, not his quiet strength, not the way he could read a room without saying a word. But I've learned that missing someone and moving forward are not opposites. They're twins, walking side by side. There are still days when I wake up and forget, for a breath, that he's gone. And then I remember. But now, the remembering doesn't break me. It roots me. This life, this second life, I didn't ask for it. But I claimed it. That's the difference. I claimed my name. I claimed my place. I claimed my legacy. For women my age, the world has a funny way of making us invisible. We give. We host. We soften. And slowly, without realizing it, we shrink ourselves to fit the needs of everyone else. But here's the thing. We don't disappear. We're just waiting for the right moment to step back into the light. Alan saw that, before I did. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been made to feel like your chapter has ended, like your worth expired the moment someone else's story began, I want you to hear this. You are not done. You are not small. And you are certainly not forgettable. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply stay standing. Not with fists, not with fury, but with facts, with clarity, with the full weight of who she's become. That's what I did. Not to prove them wrong, but to remind myself I was always right to begin with. And that's the real inheritance I plan to leave behind.